But I think what was cool for me in growing up in Barbados was that I would sail all year in the winter, and then when it came to like hurricane season, I would actually go to Canada in the summer, and I
Right.
would go and
Mm.
compete. And I was on like a sailing team in Canada in the summer.
All right. Welcome everyone to another great episode of Let's Move Canada. We're your hosts, Dana and Luigi from the Canadian Health and Fitness Institute. And on today's podcast of Let's Move Canada, we will talk to Olympic sailor Sarah Douglas about what inspires her and what being healthy means to her. Now, before we introduce Sarah, of course, let me start by saying that this podcast is brought to you by the Canadian Health and Fitness Institute, whose mission is to make Canada the fittest nation on earth by 2030. And to this end, of course, our podcast aims to raise awareness about physical and mental health. And now, the time of the day, we want to introduce someone who is truly inspiring to us, and that is Sarah Douglas. And Sarah is a record breaking Canadian sailor who's been making waves both on and off water. Now, Sarah made history at Tokyo 2020 with a sixth place finish at the Radial class, the best ever Olympic result for Canadian women in an individual sailing event. Now, since then, she's claimed gold at the Trofeo Princesa Sofia in 2022 and the Semaine Olympique Française in 2023. Added a silver medal at the Santiago 2023 Pan Am Games to her collection and battled through illness to win gold at Lima 2019. Quite the journey, quite the story. And diagnosed with alpha thalassemia at just 14, Sarah has pushed through every challenge to become one of the fittest and most competitive sailors in the world. And off the water, she's just an amazing advocate for young women in sports and as an ambassador for Fast and Female, a foodie, and an all around inspiration. So, Sarah is here today to tell us her story, and we're just so excited to dive into it. Sarah, welcome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat. And I mean, what a thing to hear back about, kind of my history and my career so far. And I'm just very proud.
Yeah, it's amazing, and I can't wait to learn more. I know nothing about sailing, so I am super excited about this. So why don't you tell us first where you grew up, where you are now, and tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Yeah, I mean, I was a bit all over as a child. I was born in Canada, but my parents were kind of not really into the whole winter thing. And so we actually moved back to Barbados, which is where they're originally from. And so I got the like privilege and pleasure to actually grow up on an island. And that's really where I fell in love with the sport of sailing. From there, I came to Canada for high school and kind of just stayed in Canada since then. Now I live in New York and I'm traveling all the time, but it was really growing up in Barbados that led me to falling in love with the sport of sailing.
Sounds really cool. And at what age did you start sailing?
At 7.
Whoa,
Really young, really
that
young.
is so
Yeah.
young.
Yeah, my brother actually went to summer camp in Canada and somehow going from Barbados to Canada, he got exposed to sailing and he came back to the island and said, you know what, I would love to learn how to sail. And my family had never been sailing before. We had no sports background. And it started off as a father-son thing. And then eventually I learned, and then my mom learned. And then we just became obsessed with the sport of sailing and just fell in love. And he went to 2 Olympics himself. And then, yeah, I've just done two. So it really captured our hearts.
Okay, so sailing is like a big deal, right? You need to get a boat. You need to like learn how to sail. You need to that's a big skill, right? So your brother came home and said that he loved sailing. He and then and what your parents were like, well, now we need to get a boat and or how did that work?
Not quite. So they actually went to another island. They went to, I think it was to Beckway in St. Vincent the Grenadines, and they had like a learn to sail program on like a bigger boat.
Oh,
So
cool.
it was just my dad and him that went to the other island, got exposure, had lessons, and then when they came back to Barbados, we joined the yacht club, and then you can just like charter or rent boats. It took a couple of years until we owned our own.
Mhm.
But yeah, we just would just rent and charter and then just more exposure. And then like, okay, well, now we're ready to make the investment in having a sailboat for the family. So then, okay, now we need the optimist, this like youth boat to start competing more. And, next thing you know, we're going to North American championships, we're going to world championships at like age 12.
That's
Wow,
amazing. That is
pretty
amazing.
cool.
And what a good way to like spend time together as a family too.
Exactly. Every family vacation was revolved around us competing. We took family vacations on the boat to different islands.
Wow,
Um, Even just this past year over Christmas, we chartered a boat and just spent a really nice family vacation sailing in St. Vincent and the Grenadines again.
really, really cool. And now I'm curious, right? So, just like Dana, I don't know too much about sailing. So, are there different positions? What do you do? What did your parents do? What did your brother do? Like, how does it all work to kind of just get to where you're going and also to do it in a competitive fashion?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the reasons why I love sailing so much is that you have so many options. So you could do what I do and go fully professional, and you could be in a boat by yourself. You can be in a boat of 10, 15, 20. There is really so many different types of boats. You have America's Cup, you have SailGP, you have Olympic sailing,
Mm-hmm.
or you could just go for a cruise. You could just go for a Friday night sail, or you could either live on a boat full year round, or you could just go there for a couple hours. Like there's so many options. And so that's why it's amazing where it's like my hobby and my, you know, profession.
Mhm.
Oh, that's just really, really cool. Uh, Before we move on to the next question, I'm also really curious. In the Caribbean, we know that there's rainy season and there's non-rainy season. I imagine those are two very different sailing experiences. What would you say was probably the most difficult sailing experience that you've had in the Caribbean?
Anytime it's really windy, um, it's always a bit scary when especially when you're growing up and you're a child and it gets really windy and you're feeling a little bit more uncomfortable. But I think what was cool for me in growing up in Barbados was that I would sail all year in the winter, and then when it came to like hurricane season, I would actually go to Canada in the summer and I
Right.
would go and
Mm.
compete. And I was on like a sailing team in Canada in the summer.
Oh, that's
Makes perfect
cool.
sense.
Where were you in Canada? What team? What team?
It's called the Lake Ontario Optimist team. It's like a traveling team. So it was
Right.
like 10 kids in a van with a coach and chaperones each week. And we basically travel around North America to different competitions. And it was crazy. I met some of my best friends there, that I have to this day. And yeah, it was a very cool experience. Just so many kids in a van traveling around North America.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
The journey.
Yeah. So, okay, so tell us about some challenges you faced over your whole life sailing. There must have been some crazy stories.
Yeah, I mean, sailing can throw everything at you. There's been days where I felt really scared and nervous, and you see sharks, like in that aspect, to um, the challenges of also like sailing is not an inexpensive sport. So as soon as you get, especially to the high level, and you have to travel and you have equipment costs, that was a really big challenge in finding the funds and fundraising. And it's a massive
Mhm.
effort in getting to an Olympic Games at that high
Hmm.
level, as is with a lot of sports, like, skiing or like those kind of sports where there's a barrier to entry. Um, and that for the last 10 years has been a big effort in terms of fundraising and finding the funds. And I've had amazing supporters. So that was a big challenge in how to get the finances and the resources available so that I could progress in sport. The other challenge that I've had is with all the travel and the intense training is burnout. I've been
Hmm.
on the national team for 10 years, and especially towards, the last couple of years, burnout has been quite prevalent.
Mhm.
And that's where I've just been really trying to balance, my scheduling and my training loads and balancing the burnout of it all, especially when you get this high of a level.
And how do you handle that? Like, how do you handle burnout? I mean, I would imagine that takes a toll on your mental health as well if you don't handle it properly. So, how do you take care of that?
Yeah, it's really about listening to your body and listening to myself. Every year is an evolution and figuring out, when is the time to take a step back
Hmm.
and, take a step back from the training or the traveling to really basically fill up my cup again and
Hmm.
figure out when is the time to um, like, yeah, reduce those training loads. The second thing as well is just making sure to have fun, which, when you have intense training and you're out in the water for 3 hours and then you have gym training, like finding the moments of like gratitude and having fun and being like, this is why I love this sport
Hmm.
has really helped me in the sport of sailing and for being balancing that burnout.
It makes a lot of sense. And what have been some highlights so far in your careers?
I mean, you read the bio. I mean, I've had some amazing success. Winning the Princess Sofia Regatta in Spain was definitely a
Oh,
highlight for
that's
me.
amazing. Yeah.
Really, really cool.
Yeah, that was a highlight and just kind of a moment where, I'd always been in that like sixth to 10th overall position. And it
Hmm.
was kind of like my breakthrough and said, okay, you know what? I can do that. I have the ability to be on the podium. And it really actually allowed me to have a lot more confidence in myself and that I had the ability to step onto the podium. So for that, that was quite an iconic like step in my journey. But then, yeah, battling through sickness to win gold at Pan Am's to just the program that I've kind of had and the support and building. Like it's just me in the boat, but like I have a massive team
Hmm.
around me. And I'm very proud of like the team that I've built and kind of being like the CEO of my own program.
So can you give a little bit of an overview of what is a regatta like? Like how long are you out there? What's the goal? How many people are racing? Can you just get a little bit of that?
Yeah, totally. So I guess it's a bit different from a World Cup or competition versus like an Olympic Games. So in Olympic Games, you'll only have one representative per country, and you only have 45 countries. So you only have 45 athletes going around the course at the same time. While at a World Cup, you have like 3 or 4 people from your country.
Hmm.
And so it'll be, say, 110 competitors. We do split up into groups, so you'll never really have more than 50 sailors going around the same course. But the way it works in sailing is that our regattas are like a series of races. So majority of them are 10 races, and we compete over 5 days. And then it's like a best of series. So we all go around this course at the same time. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour.
Oh wow,
And
that's pretty long
you're
actually.
Yeah,
Hold on.
it is an endurance sport. Yeah, it is an
Yeah.
endurance sport because it is for 5 days and you do 2 races a day.
Oh, wow.
So
Wow.
you go around this course and your finish position is your points. So you finish second place, you get 2 points, you get 35th overall, you get 35 points. Your
Hmm.
goal at the end of it is to have the least amount of points.
Mm.
After those 10 races, we go into like a finals. It's called a medal race. And it's only the top 10 out of those 10 races continue on. And it's a short, fast-paced race. So it's only about 20 minutes.
Wow.
And it's double points. So things can really move around and it's quite strategic and tactical. But yeah, it's quite an endeavor to compete over five days, and then you have the finals on the sixth day.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That is
A lot.
intense. Yeah.
It's quite
And then you factor on the sun, the heat, or the
Right.
colds, and then you know, we're driven by wind. You don't always get wind in the right window. So sometimes
right.
you're
Right.
waiting for wind. Sometimes there's too much wind. Sometimes you don't get races on that scheduled day. So now you have to push more races onto the next day.
Uh,
Um, it could be
Right.
windy for all 5 days and you're exhausted, or you could not have wind. So we are really driven by the elements.
and you have a big team that you're probably working with as well, right? So everyone kind of just needs to be on it, on it. Yeah. Wow. I'm curious now with all of the things that you've accomplished and even describing those detailed experiences. What's next? What are some goals that you have for the future?
Yeah, I'm kind of actually in the process of redeveloping or trying to figure that out because, it's been 10 years of being on the national team,
Right.
10 years of training. And so my body's actually taken quite a bit of a hit. And so I actually have an upcoming hip surgery. I have an
Oh,
overuse
wow.
injury. So recovery from that is about 6 months back to sport. So that is my next goal is just making sure that I am first as healthy as possible going into that surgery, and then
Hmm.
coming out of it, have the best, smoothest recovery as possible. Really leaning into the process because it will be a process of me getting back walking to squatting to taking steps upstairs. Like it is quite an extensive process. So those are my next goals of just like leaning into the recovery. From there, I'll figure out, do I want to go back into LA? Do I want to take on more professional sailing and coaching and kind of step away from the Olympic side?
Hmm.
Do I want to switch careers? It's very much up in the air right now, and that's what I'm trying to figure out.
Defining chapter of sorts, right? So
Mhm.
we really would wish you lots of success with that upcoming surgery. So hopefully everything works well.
Thanks. Yeah, I knew it was coming. I actually probably injured myself before the Tokyo Olympics, and I didn't get an MRI until after Tokyo. And I did everything. I did the physio, I did the injections, and nothing was really helping. And so
Yeah.
I knew it was coming, and so that's what's kind of next for me in sport. And it's like not that far away from my wedding as well. So there's also that
Oh,
step.
congrats.
Wedding.
Yay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you. I have been engaged for like 2 years, but um, yeah, I'm very excited to also, that's kind of my next, I'm in
Yeah,
the planning process
lots
of a
happening.
Ex-
wedding.
Yeah,
So much
it's very
happening.
exciting. Can you tell us, you like alluded to a little bit that you dealt with some sickness. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
In terms of burnout or
Oh
hip
no, I think
injury,
so. What Luigi mentioned at the beginning of the podcast. What was that, Luigi?
It
oh,
was
it's a Pan Am Games.
yeah, alpha thalassemia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
So basically, what was happening in high school is that I was iron deficient.
Hmm.
And I kept on getting tests, and it was like I was taking iron and it wasn't helping. And it was like, why? I've been taking iron for months. What's the reason? Why am I not
Mhm.
absorbing it? And it turns out it's a genetic blood disorder called, yeah, alpha thalassemia. And for a lot of people, they wouldn't necessarily notice it, but because I'm competing at a high level,
Right.
basically I have smaller and less red blood cells, which carry oxygen in the body.
Oh, okay.
So
Wow.
most people wouldn't necessarily notice it, but because putting my body through a lot,
Hmm.
I was still like really tired and my energy wasn't quite there.
Hmm.
And so it's something that I've also been managing, with the burnout and the alpha thalassemia and, my iron levels is just kind of
Wow.
is figuring that out.
That's amazing that you persevered through all of that, right? That would be a big deal. Do you think all of this, how do you think it's impacted your physical health? Like, is it been a net good then for all the extra work and all the extra physical activity you've been putting on your body?
I definitely think that it has made me very aware about where my energy goes.
Hmm.
Hmm.
I'm very cognizant of where I put my energy and how I'm using it. So I think there I've really learned a lot about my body and how it works and when is too much and when it's not enough. And that is a constant calibration. But I think due to the blood disorder, I'm just very aware of yeah, how
Yeah.
Hmm.
everything works.
And that must have had an impact on your mental health as well, right? Just being like very aware that you're going to be tired or you're going to be exhausted sometimes, right? But you
Mhm.
kept pushing through and you just that's to me that's like amazing. That's very resilient and persevering and
Mhm.
that's
And I
admirable.
never wanted it. Yeah, I never wanted it to be like something that held me back. I never wanted it
Hmm.
to be something like an excuse. I just was like, okay, this is what's happening with my body. This is something unique to me. And how can we work with it? And how can we continue to push to a high level, knowing with this blood disorder? And how can we progress? So that's where I've had an amazing team. I've talked to specialists. I have my strength
Mhm.
and conditioning coach, the physiologist, and everyone's aware of it.
Yeah.
And how can we manage it?
So mindset and support system. These are two big elements.
Mhm. Huge. Support system is everything when it comes to like making your goals.
Right.
Whether it's, support, personal, Olympic sport. I just find that I'm so reliant on my support team, and I've really built a support team, and I'm
Mhm.
very grateful for them.
No, no, such a wonderful message, very inspiring, and
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
sure you take that with you as an advocate. I know earlier we mentioned that you're very much an advocate for young women in sport, as an ambassador for Fast and Female, and so when we think about what you do, even outside of sailing, we're very curious to know how what are your hobbies outside of sailing, and how do you take that with you where you go outside of sailing?
Yeah, it's tough when I don't, it's tough having hobbies as a professional athlete, I guess I will say.
We get that answer
Um,
quite a bit.
yeah, it's tough. The amazing thing about the sport of sailing is that it is also a hobby. In that, I can have an intense training session on the water, be super competitive, push my body to then just going for a casual sail and that kind of being the hobby side. Like
Right,
just the thing about being on the water, it can be so relaxing. It can be like a sense of freedom. And in one side, it can, and when it comes to like Olympic sailing or professional sport, it can take away from my cup, while a hobby side of sailing can fill my cup up. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Yes, for
just
sure.
that's the really cool thing, that it's first my job, but also a hobby.
right,
Um, and then outside of that, like I love eating, cooking, trying new foods. I think that's one of the cool things about like traveling and competing around the world, is that you can try all the different types of food,
Hmm.
whether you're in Japan, Argentina, Spain. Like I'm leaning in on all the
Hmm.
different types of food.
I
So that's
love
kind of a hobby as well.
I love to hear that because throughout your story, I've imagined, okay, you probably have a maybe not so rigid diet, but it's pretty well defined, right? And so hearing you saying that you lean into the different cuisines that you're exposed to, I'm so curious to know, do you actually have a pretty strict diet, or is it as I'm assuming it is, where you kind of just what's going, as long as you know what's going in and out of your, like, as long as excuse me, as long as you know what's going in your body and you're able to control carbs, etc., then you're good. Is that right? Or do you have like a particular regimen that you have to follow?
Yeah, I think that's probably what I get a lot. I get asked like, "Oh, like you must have a really intense diet for being an Olympic athlete." I'm like, I don't. Obviously, like, like like we work out so hard, and like I'm gonna enjoy the ice cream when I want to enjoy the ice cream.
Mhm.
There's times where I'm gonna eat very clean, and it really depends, I guess, on competition and where I am. But for me, it's really about the energy management. So I'm making sure that I'm getting enough food in. What is being my number one priority is just making sure after, you know, training and after gym sessions that I'm consuming enough food and that I'm staying hydrated. Because we're in the sun so much
Yeah.
and we're
Hmm.
out in the water, hydration is like my number one priority. And that's something I've worked on for the last couple of years, and just being prepared. Like little things of just like, okay, I'm going to make sure I have a wrap or fruit or nuts or something while I'm on the go, and I'm making sure that I'm consuming enough calories, because that really drives the energy levels as well.
Right, right,
Makes
right. We always do end with this one question, but I have one more question before we get there. So I know that you're was the word ambassador for young women athletes? Is that what you said? Yeah. So what does that look like? What are you doing? What advice do you have? What
Mhm.
Tell us about it.
Yeah, I mean, I do a number of different things. I do some coaching. I mentor some RBC future athletes,
Oh, cool.
fast and female. I do some stuff with them. So I always am just trying to, yes, help them out, answer any questions, because, for me, my Olympic dream was actually sparked by a female athlete. I was
I
one
was
of
gonna
those young
ask that.
athletes.
Who was it?
Yeah, Rosie McLennan. the
Oh,
like
okay. Yes.
GOAT,
Yes, yes,
the
yes.
best person from Canada. So yeah, I was six. Well, how old was I? I think I was no, I was less. I was older than that. I was 18, and I was sitting in a group. It was like an athlete panel happening at a Team Ontario camp. I was an alternate for the sport of sailing. And she was speaking, and a number of different athletes were speaking about, their
That's
Olympic journey, um, what it was like to stand on the podium. And yeah, it was an amazing thing for her to win gold, but it was really the journey. And I was sitting there in the crowd, kind of had an epiphany thing. What am I doing? I want to do that. And she has been a huge role model for me. She has checked in with me. We've been teammates. She was in
Mm,
Paris as an athlete services
really cool.
member for our
hmm.
Team Canada. And so I really do believe in the power of role models and mentors because I myself have experienced that. And so now I try to be kind of that person for anyone coming up, or anyone that aspires to be an Olympic athlete, an Olympic sailor, or really just want to get better in their sport.
Yeah.
So the last question is, what is something Canada should focus more on when it comes to health?
Oof, I mean, there's so many ways or so many things that I think that we all can improve on, whether it's steps on a daily basis to eating better, to checking in on your friends and the mental health. Something that I've experienced recently is kind of, and it's not, I guess it's maybe a little bit more on the political side, but just access to doctors um, sooner rather than later. And that's,
Mm-hmm.
whether if you're having like an elective surgery, for example, with my hip surgery, like it's very long wait times. But that's like another aspect. I think what we can do is, yeah, increasing your steps, talking to your friends about mental health and just being open and honest and vulnerable because there's a lot more people that are going through it than you think they are. Like there are so many times where I'm like really struggling with burnout and I think it's only happening to me.
Right.
And then I go to my teammate and I'm like, hey, I'm really struggling. I'm not enjoying the training. And they're saying, you know what? I'm feeling the exact same way. And so sharing that really does make a big difference. And I think Canadians lean in more on that.
I really love that. So a little bit of self-care, but you do that through opening up sooner rather than later, because people are opening up. It's just do it a little bit sooner, right? So I like that. I think it's really good advice.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I don't necessarily need to talk about the healthcare system that we have in Canada, but
Yeah, we're our we want to push proactive healthcare. Like what
Mhm.
what you're saying. It's like how do we get Canadians healthier just of what they can actually do, right? Steps they can take, like being
Mhm.
physically active and eating healthy and what you're saying, talking to people about burnout and all that kind of thing. It's like how do we inspire and motivate people to do that, right? Because it's
Oh,
hard.
yeah.
Let's be honest, it can be really difficult, right? So, but when
yeah,
people like you and Olympic athletes like you come on and talk about your story and your journey and you are a role model and you're something to look up to and you're like this person, right? I want is it's inspiring to people to want to take control over those aspects of their life. So that's what that's what we're all about right here.
yeah, and proactive is everything because, one of the reasons why I have to get a hip surgery and I have a hip injury is because I wasn't proactive enough in the like little details. So what I
Hmm.
mean by that is like going to the gym and warming up before you go into a workout. So many young athletes aren't necessarily taught to do those like little like band exercises or warm up
Hmm.
like your hips or your body before you just like go into a workout.
Right.
So those kind of
Hmm.
things I missed out on as a youth athlete, and now I'm kind of like paying the price for it. And so, yeah, being more proactive so that it's better off further down the line.
No,
Hmm.
I love that message. And then I think just to wrap it all up, this is just a message for you to start where you are. Just wherever you are, just start. Be proactive, talk sooner than you would, engage sooner than you would. And yeah, we could go from there and we get you moving.
Hmm.
All right. Well, we want to thank Sarah for joining us today. Thank you so much for coming on and for sharing your story. Really, really appreciated it and really enjoyed it, quite frankly.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it too. And thanks for having me on, guys. This has been awesome.
Of course, you're welcome. And thank you to everyone for tuning into this episode of Let's Move Canada. We're your hosts, Dana and Luigi. And if you want to learn more about Sarah, please follow her Instagram at Sarah Douglas _. So that is SARAHDOUGLAS _. Or you can go on her website at sarahdouglassailing.com. That is SARAHDOUGLASSAILING.com. In addition, make sure to follow our Instagram at Let's Move Canada and keep up with our latest updates, or you can head over to our website at chfi.fit to learn more about our mission. And don't hesitate to DM us if you are interested in being a guest on Let's Move Canada, or if you have a suggestion for an awesome guest. And stay tuned for next episode announcements, and see you next time.